welcome to another edition of the NFL Network, being recorded on a Tuesday night. You know, we're up in the club going up on a Tuesday, got your girl in the cover sheet choosing. I am so sorry for that, but I am recording this on a Tuesday night. Usually I do this on Wednesday night, but with Thursday being Thanksgiving and we've got an NFL triple header coming up, I decided to go ahead and do this a day earlier. So, we're going to talk about my this week's power rankings, of course, and also the games coming up in Week 13. But before we do that, it's time to introduce another new segment to the program because we actually can do this now. Ladies and gentlemen, you hear that music coming up? That's right. It's time for our first ever the NFL Network Path to the Playoffs. Again, I apologize for that completely, but ladies and gentlemen, we actually have our very first playoff clinching scenarios, and we'll get to those in just a second. But let's take a look at where we are sitting right now as Week 12 came to an end yesterday. And as you can see right here, the Kansas City Chiefs still hold on to the number one seed at 10-1 in the AFC. They're going to win the AFC West pretty easily. I mean, it's not really going to be close, even though we do have two teams who are very closely in the wild card hunt. But second, of course, we have the Buffalo Bills sitting at 9-2. The Steelers are still at 8-3, despite losing to Cleveland and Baltimore gaining on them. Didn't matter what happened on Monday night. Baltimore was still going to be behind Pittsburgh, but who knows how much longer that's going to last. And the Houston Texans are still hanging around as the top team in the AFC South because, let's be honest, everybody else in that division is pretty terrible right now. But the Houston Texans ain't got nothing to really be happy about right now. We'll delve into them in just a second. But as you can see with the wild cards, Baltimore, Los Angeles Chargers, and the Denver Broncos are currently your three teams in the AFC wild card. And in the hunt, we have the Miami Dolphins, who have won 3 straight. They have won 3 straight. They are very much in contention. They could easily knock out one of the top 3 wild card teams in the next couple of weeks if they continue on with this pace. But got a tough game coming up on Thursday night, which we'll delve into in a moment. And right now, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Jaguars are currently tied right now for the worst record in the conference right now. So that is a glimpse of the AFC right now. Well, let's go ahead and move over to the NFC real quick. And in the NFC, the Detroit Lions continue to hold on to the number 1 seed in the conference. They have won 9 straight. They are 10-1. And right behind them are the Philadelphia Eagles sitting at 9-2. They look like they're comfortably in control of the NFC East. The Seattle Seahawks took the lead over the Arizona Cardinals after their big win on Sunday to go to 6-5 and currently hold on to the 3 seed. And the Atlanta Falcons still hanging in there at 6-5. Even though they were off this week with the bye, they have lost 2 straight. And Tampa Bay, they're slowly but surely getting back on track here. I mean, they're going to be without one of their top wide receivers coming up for the rest of the season. But Mike Evans came back last week, and the results spoke for themselves. I mean, they just dominated over the New York Giants. But they're still very much in the hunt. Wild cards right now. The Minnesota Vikings sitting at 9-2. They have won 4 straight. The Packers have won 2 straight. They are now sitting at 8-3 at the 6th spot. And the Washington Commanders are still hanging in there despite a 3-game losing streak that began with the Steelers, and then they lost on Thursday to Philadelphia, and then last week they lost a heartbreaking game to the Cowboys, the lowly Cowboys. And yet they're still hanging in there, but Arizona is still hanging around in there. Arizona is that team I talked about at the beginning of the season that could be very sneaky and stick around possibly for a wild card spot, or maybe even the top spot in the division, because the 49ers aren't the same football team they were before last season. And like I said, Tampa Bay is still very much in contention for the wild card. Los Angeles as well, even though the Rams lost badly on Sunday to the Philadelphia Eagles. 49ers, I think, are still in there, but time is running out for them. They got to start churning out some wins here. New Orleans possibly trying to make a comeback here. They've won 2 straight. They were on their bye week last week. I wouldn't expect Dallas, Carolina, or New York, obviously, to not make it. And I would not be surprised if the New York Giants end up being the number 1 draft pick overall, get the number 1 draft pick when the season is over. But let's talk about those playoff clinching scenarios, because we do have 2 of them in Week 13, and they are as follows. It's 2 teams in the AFC, the 2 leading teams in the AFC, and it involves starting with the Kansas City Chiefs on Friday, because they play a Black Friday game against the Las Vegas Raiders in Arrowhead. That'll be at 3 p.m. on Amazon Prime. Kansas City can clinch a playoff berth with the following things. The Kansas City Chiefs win on Friday, and then Miami loses on Thursday. Kansas City wins, and Denver loses on Monday. Kansas City wins, the Chargers lose, and the Denver Broncos tie, or Kansas City ties, and Miami loses. So, basically, Kansas City's pretty much going to have every opportunity to possibly get a clinch a playoff berth this weekend. They can't win the division just yet, but it's going to happen sooner rather than later at this point. But the Buffalo Bills, they have a game coming up against the 49ers on Sunday Night Football. The Bills can clinch the AFC East division with two things. One, a win against the 49ers, and two, Miami losing to Green Bay on Thursday night. Two things that could real easily happen because, the Miami Dolphins are going to Green Bay, and as we'll talk about later on, Miami does not play very well when the temperatures are below 40, which is what it's going to be on Thursday night. Now, I thought there was only two clinching scenarios for the AFC, but no, the NFC also has one too. Only one. And that is the Detroit Lions, who, of course, are sitting at 10-1. They've got a game on Thanksgiving Day. It's going to be the first of the NFL triple headers games. And Detroit has the possibility to clinch a playoff berth, but here's what needs to happen. There are 6 different scenarios of what needs to happen for the Lions to essentially clinch a playoff berth. And they go like this. First of all, Detroit needs to win. San Francisco needs to lose to Buffalo. Arizona needs to lose. Seattle needs to lose. And Tampa Bay needs to lose. Scenario number 2. Detroit wins. San Francisco loses. Arizona loses. Seattle ties. Tampa Bay loses or ties. Scenario number 3. Detroit wins. San Francisco loses or ties. Arizona loses or ties. Seattle loses. Washington loses. And Atlanta loses. Scenario number 4, Detroit wins, San Francisco loses or ties, Arizona loses or ties, Seattle loses, Washington loses, and Atlanta ties. Scenario number 5, Detroit wins, San Francisco loses, Arizona loses, Seattle ties, Washington loses or ties, and Atlanta loses. And 6, finally, Detroit wins, San Francisco loses or ties, Arizona loses, Seattle ties, Washington loses, Atlanta ties. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that Detroit probably isn't gonna clinch anything this weekend. Now, if they can find a way to win, they could be one step closer to eventually clinching something. But you basically would need a lot to happen this weekend for the Lions to clinch playoff berths. Right now, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are the only two teams right now who seem like they're primed and ready to go clinch some playoff spots and get the first 2 spots of the playoffs coming up. So those are the 3 playoff clinching scenarios for Week 13 of the season, so we will see what happens this weekend. But before we get to the weekend games, let's go ahead and move on now to the NFL Power Rankings for this week. And as you can see, really not much has changed from last week. You may have noticed that the Steelers are all the way down at the bottom of the Power Rankings, and it's because, when you're 8-2, and you go into Cleveland and you play an egg like that against a team like the Cleveland Browns, you're not going to be surprised to see me put this at the bottom of the list there. Even though I had them losing that game, I wasn't expecting them to lose that badly, and they lost in a really, really rough way, to the point where we'll delve into it a little bit later on here, but I'll just tell you, the season is not looking too bright for them. This is the nightmare scenario I was worried about. But let's get to the top 5 in particular. And we'll start off with number 5. The Green Bay Packers are back up in the top 5 after a dominant win over the San Francisco 49ers. And in a game that I probably should have changed my prediction for when I found out that Brock Purdy was not going to play. And yet I kept it in there because, any given Sunday, anything can happen. Who knows? Christian McCaffrey may find his wings again. But Green Bay dominated them, no question about it. It was pretty much their game to take over, and they did everything they could and then some. The defense was at their best. The offense was getting better. This team is finding their way again. They're in a tough spot right now in the NFC North, with Detroit leading and Minnesota right behind them. They got to get past. They got to face a lot of trepidations to get through there. But if they can have another miracle playoff run like they did last year, when they went into Dallas and beat them and nearly beat the San Francisco 49ers, they could make a deep run in the playoffs if they can continue this pace. Number 4, I have the Kansas City Chiefs. Even though last week they didn't play their best game overall, kind of like what I predicted, the Carolina Panthers came ready to play, and Bryce Young, give that guy a lot of credit, man, for a guy who literally lost his job halfway through the season and then and then brought back up. Panthers are finding their way again. They gave Kansas City everything, but in the end, it was too little, too late for them. And Kansas City's kind of pretty much in there because there was no really other significant wins overall that really impressed me to really knock them out of there. But yeah, they're sitting at 10-1, and I'm still of the belief that we're going to see the Kansas City Chiefs lose some games they should win because it's getting to that point. It's at that point where, this is where Philadelphia was last year. This was where Arizona was a couple years ago. They were sitting at this comfortable, dominant performance, and in December, they just kind of collapsed and folded pretty quickly. The Steelers did that, of course, in 2020, so I'm not going to be that surprised that that happens again here with the Chiefs. Even though they've won 2 Super Bowls and they look like they're going to be very much in contention for a third one. We'll wait to see what happens there. Buffalo's at 3, mostly because they're on their bye week and nobody else really came in to really replace them there. Everything else is kind of pretty much the same as it was before. Number 2, I have the Philadelphia Eagles sitting at 9-2. Good Lord, man. A dominant performance over the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley are really turning into a dominant threat right now. And if they somehow find a way to go into Baltimore this week and beat the Ravens, that's just going to prove that they are back into full form, man. They're getting hot at the right time. And Saquon Barkley, man, he's putting up these record numbers in general that are just really impressive on so many levels. They're going to give the number 1 team a hard time if they make it all the way if they go deep in the playoffs. And speaking of the number 1 team, not really a shocker at all. The Detroit Lions are still hanging on there at the number 1 spot. Another good performance this weekend overall. They really, once again, dominated over a lackluster Indianapolis Colts team that they should have easily beaten, and they did. So, not much more to say about that. Overall, kind of a lackluster weekend in terms of significant changes in the power rankings overall. So, with that said, let's jump into the playoffs. Not the playoffs, the predictions for this week. And let's start by addressing the elephant in the room that was last week's predictions. Now, I know I did go a little bit crazy on the predictions last week, but surely I was able to at least get some of them right. I mean, I can't imagine me having a bad week like I thought I had. And oh, Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? Oh, yeah, that happened. The second worst week of the season for me, 5 of 13. Only bested by week 2. This is what happens when I went all in on the let's go crazy scenario, and it went crazy in the complete opposite directions, because you get results like that. 5 out of 13. Jesus. So, can we turn the tide on week 13? Let's go ahead and see, and may God have mercy on my soul, because, after last week, all bets are off. So, let's go ahead and take a look at my Week 13 predictions, starting with the Thanksgiving tripleheader we have on Thursday. And we'll start off, of course, with the Chicago Bears taking on the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions, like I said before, got a big win over the Indianapolis Colts, a dominant win for the most part. Chicago really gave it to Minnesota. They had every opportunity to come back in that game. They took it to overtime. They couldn't get into field goal range in time, and Minnesota just ran all over them in overtime, and Minnesota walked out of there with a win. And, like I said, and Caleb Williams, I mean, that was his best game overall. Like, he's returning to what everyone was kind of expecting from him from the get-go. When you got rid of Shane Walden, you brought in Thomas Brown. The offensive play calling is getting a whole lot better. It's just getting the wins that are extremely important now for the Bears to have any life to them. I don't think they're going to beat the playoffs in any way, shape, or form, but, last week was a positive note in the right direction. So, and you got to have a quick turnaround, because guess what you're doing on Thursday? You're going into Detroit in a place where the Lions right now are dominating. They're 10-1. They look primed and ready to go for another deep playoff run. And this should be an easy win for the Lions, one would think. But there is one important thing that I think a lot of people have yet to really dissect into this situation here, because, the Detroit Lions are playing great football right now. They're playing incredible football right now. They are playing some of the best football in the league this season. But, Thanksgiving Day. Let's talk about the last time the Lions won a game on Thanksgiving Day. You want to know what when the last time that was? November 24th of 2016, when they barely beat the Minnesota Vikings. So yeah, it's been 8 years since they won a game on Thanksgiving Day. And last year they were a really good football team too, and then Green Bay came into their building and just completely decimated them on Thanksgiving Day. And ever since then, the home team has had the upper hand. Like, for some reason on Thanksgiving Day, the Lions just can't put it together. They can't find a way to win these games. Chicago has won the last 3 times that they've played the Lions on Thanksgiving Day, and these were bad Chicago Bears teams too. Like, these were teams that were not that great overall, and yet they found a way to win those games. So because of that, I am actually going to say that the Chicago Bears will find a way to win this game. And I say this because of the history. It's been 8 years since they've won a game. It's been 8 years since the Lions have won on Thanksgiving, and because of that, I'm sticking with the history. I think the Bears will get a win here. I don't think it's going to be a very clean game on any means necessary. It's going to be a very ugly game. It'll be back and forth, but I think Chicago finds a way to get the win. They've been trying to get for the last 2 weeks. I mean, it's come down to field goals. I'm going to say a field goal probably wins it for the Bears here, and I'm going to go ahead and pick the Bears to win this one. So give me the Chicago Bears to go to 5-7 and the Lions to go to 10-2. And for me to use the meme once again with Brian inside the Lions pen in the zoo. Hey, it's Thanksgiving. Shouldn't you guys be in Detroit playing a bad football game? I mean that's probably what's going to happen. As good as the Lions are, they're bound to slip up one time coming up here, and I think this is going to be one of those times. So like I said, give me the Bears to win it. 5-7 for the Bears, 10-2 for the Lions. Excuse me. And then you've got a showdown in Jerry World. The New York Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants. Yeah. What a week they had since the last time I heard from you guys on this show. They got rid of their quarterback, Daniel Jones, who is possibly going to be picked up by a team probably tomorrow. And the bad news is, unfortunately, it's not going to be with the Cowboys, which I thought could have been the only way this game against the Giants and the Cowboys could have been salvageable if Daniel Jones was the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. But to the Dallas Cowboys' credit, they won a crazy game that came down to the fourth quarter and all this craziness that happened then. Barely getting out of Washington with a win, so I got to give credit where credit is due. Giants got decimated by Tampa Bay, which is slowly but surely finding their way, but is it too little too late for the Buccaneers? We'll find out a little bit later on when I talk about them, but I mean, the Giants right now, they're just kind of waiting for the season to end, because like I said before, they seem to be in prime position to eventually get the number 1 overall pick and get whatever quarterback's coming out of the draft that's going to be a top pick. I feel like that's going to happen overall. I feel like the Giants are just waiting for the season to end at this point. They have shown brief flashes of promise. Malik Neighbors has shown brief flashes of promise. Tyrone Tracy has shown a lot of promise overall. But when you're a team that spends more money on a quarterback that you decide to get rid of 2 years into his new contract, while Saquon Barkley is just having a ball down in Philadelphia, yeah, it's hard not to criticize a team like the New York Giants. And neither one of these teams are really good in general. This is going to be kind of like with the Bears and Lions games, this is going to be a very, very sloppy football game. I almost thought maybe of just giving it a tie and giving myself an extra point going into next week, but I'm going to say the Cowboys, they're going to continue the streak going into this week because, they found a way to win on Sunday against the Washington Commanders, and this is definitely a much worse team than the Commanders are, but at the same time, what do the Giants really have left overall? I mean, they don't have a quarterback. They stick with Tommy DeVito, who really is not that good of a QB. I don't care what anybody says. But the Cowboys have some life to them. I don't think it's going to matter when it comes to the playoffs, but they're going to keep pretending like everything is A-okay and nothing is wrong, and as long as they keep winning, they can keep saying that. Well, guess what, Cowboys? You can say that for one more week because I think you're going to win this one, and I don't think it's going to be that close. I think you're going to dominate over this team in a game that everyone's going to overhype as, oh, look at how great the Cowboys are again. Can they pull off another deep playoff run? And no, they cannot. But I'm going to say the Cowboys win this one. Give me the Cowboys to go to 5-7 and the Giants to drop to 2-10. And so we got the big game to wrap up Thanksgiving Thursday night on Thursday Night Football. The Miami Dolphins traveling to Green Bay to take on the Packers. As I said before, the Packers dominant win over the 49ers, a banged up 49ers team. Meanwhile, the Miami Dolphins have slowly but surely found their way again. They've won 3 straight. They have, with Tua back in the lineup, they're returning to form. But is it too little too late for the Dolphins is the big question coming up here. Because, yeah, they've won 3 games overall. They dominated over New England. They beat the Raiders. They haven't had a really big significant win since Tua came back. That's probably the biggest thing that they have going against them heading into this game. But another thing that they have going against them is that Tua Tagovailoa is 0-4 in games when the temperature is below 40 degrees. And the last time Tua played in the game that was below 40 degrees, that was the playoff game when the Miami Dolphins played Kansas City, and Kansas City pretty much just dominated them in cold weather. One of the coldest NFL games of recent memory. That happened back, of course, in January. But yeah, this is going to be another game where I feel like if the Dolphins are going to make a serious run in December, they've got to find a way to break that mold as a whole going into this game here. But Green Bay right now is just playing with house money. They're like I said, they're getting better as the season goes on. You know, they're finding ways to win games. They're going to give the NFC North a real tough task coming into December. Have to find a way to get past Minnesota and Detroit, of course, to have a chance to increase their playoff potential. But I think it's going to start. I think it's going to start on Thursday night. I think they're going to beat the Miami Dolphins pretty handily. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Packers to win this one. The Packers, I think, go to 9-3. Dolphins drop to 5-7. So we have one Black Friday game, of course, and that is the Raiders coming to town to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, last time the Raiders were in Arrowhead was the game, of course, where the Raiders dominated over Kansas City on Christmas Day, and that was the last loss before the Buffalo game a couple weeks ago the Chiefs would have. But Raiders really are kind of one of those teams just waiting for the season to pretty much be over so they can start planning ahead and start going into draft positioning, because right now they're in a tight spot now with the Giants and the Patriots and the Jaguars and many other teams right now who are sitting at 2-9. But yeah, I don't think we should expect to see a significant shocker game like we saw last year. I think Kansas City will pretty much find a way to beat the Raiders here. I mean, the Raiders, they showed a little bit of promise last week against the Denver Broncos, but even then, it didn't last very long as the Broncos just dominated them in the second half and never looked back. I feel like that's probably going to happen here. I don't think Kansas City is going to let the Raiders do the same thing that they did to them last Christmas again. So this should be an easy win for the Chiefs in general. So I'm going to give them the chance to win this one. Give me the Chiefs to go to 11-1 and the Raiders to drop to 2-10. Finally, moving on to the Sunday games. We start off with a matchup in Atlanta as the Falcons welcome the Los Angeles Chargers. Falcons are on a bye week. They have lost 2 straight, though. They lost to the Carolina Panthers, which was a shocker. And then they lost to the Broncos, which was an even bigger shocker because the Falcons were looking pretty good a couple weeks ago, but they have not found their way back since then. I mean, they have been very sus over the last couple of weeks. And they go into a game with the Los Angeles Chargers, who, on Monday night against Baltimore, they did the same thing that every team seems to do against the Ravens. They put up 10 points. Everyone thinks, oh, maybe this team's got a chance to beat Baltimore. And then Baltimore just runs all over them. And then they never look back. And they never get a chance to come back in the game. And the Chargers lost the game they probably should have won since they had the edge going into the start of the game. And then they did absolutely nothing in the second half. But they head to Atlanta to take on the Falcons, and for both of these teams, it's essentially a get-back game because of what happened the last time they were on the field. Falcons, of course, lost to the Denver Broncos, and the Chargers lost to the Ravens, both in embarrassing fashion. So who ends up winning this battle is the big question. And it's tough to say because J.K. Dobbins for the Chargers has been really good. But when he left the game, that was pretty much when when the tide started to turn, and the Ravens just dominated over LA on Monday night. The Falcons, they still have a lot of players on there who could still very much help them get past the hump here. I mean, Tampa Bay is not too far behind from them, and the Buccaneers, if they keep finding ways to win games, they find a way to beat the Falcons here. is for that top spot in the NFC South. But for this game in particular, it really is a toss-up. It could go really one of two ways. If J.K. Dobbins really is out for this game and the running game can't get going pretty quickly, Falcons should have a field day beating over the L.A. Chargers. And I think that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I think they're going to go into this game and find a way to win this one, get back on track, get ready for this month that they have coming up. So I'm going to take the Falcons to win this one. Give me the Falcons to go to 7-5 and the Chargers to drop to 7-5. So then we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers coming into Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. Bengals had their bye week last week, getting beaten by the Chargers in a game that, let's be honest, they probably should have won because the Chargers collapsed on the weight of their own BS. And yet J.K. Dobbins found a way to win in the final minutes of the game. And, Bengals, every game at this point is pretty much desperation mode for them, which is bad news for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got fleeced and embarrassed against the Cleveland Browns on Thursday night. That game was just, that was the worst possible scenario ever, because like I said, I had the Browns winning that game in my predictions. I knew they were probably going to win, but I did not expect them to lose that badly and to just, they just completely fell apart at the worst possible time. And just, the worst thing you can do for the Steelers is give the Cleveland Browns any kind of momentum going forward, because as we all know, the Browns turn into such the biggest assholes when a team like the Steelers gives them a chance to win a game like this, and just, it ruins the Steelers in the future and gives the Browns false hope, because they're not going to make a deep playoff run. Even if it's if they somehow find a way to win this, to make it to the playoffs, and at this point sitting at 3-8, it's a Christmas miracle. And it just goes to show you more that Deshaun Watson is really holding this team back. But back to the game in Cincinnati, because like I said, the Steelers desperately need to win this one. They cannot let the Ravens get another win this week, and that is while they get another loss, because it's just going to ruin any chance of them, any hope of them making a deep playoff run. Because we all know what's going to happen as soon as the Steelers start losing games like this. They're going to be in a wild card game, and they're going to be one and done, and everyone's going to be talking about, but hey, at least Mike Tomlin got his non-losing season record still going. It's just who gives a shit about that, man? It's getting to the point where, I'm really convinced that the Steelers are going to find some way to lose every single game except for one, just so they can Mike Tomlin can have that stupid losing season record and be 9-8. They're sitting right now at 8-3, for God's sakes. If they collapse as badly as I think they're going to do, then I just might just say fuck it and just throw away all my Steelers stuff. This may sound like joking, but it's just it's getting to the point where if nobody else is gonna bother to give a shit about winning Super Bowls, then why the hell should I give a shit about it either? With that said, though, this is a very, very unfortunate circumstance for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because, like I said, Cincinnati Bengals are pretty much in desperation mode right now, and the offense has been playing pretty good for the Bengals. Joe Burrow right now is playing some of the best football of his career. Jamar Chase, every time he finds them, it's usually a touchdown. And so that makes this game all the more difficult for the Steelers to find a way to win. And like I said, every game for this point for the Cincinnati Bengals is you have to win or the season is over. If they somehow if they lose another game, I think the Bengals season pretty much is over and done with at this point. But, that's mostly why I'm saying I think Cincinnati's going to win this one. I think Pittsburgh's going to not have enough juice to beat them. I feel it's because, I've been talking about this ever since the beginning of the season. This is the hell run for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The first 2 weeks, they dodged the first 2 bullets. They got past Washington, and then they got past Baltimore. And then they went to Cleveland, and then the first bullet hit them. And it hit them close to the heart, but we all know how the next 6 weeks are probably going to go, unfortunately. If you've been watching this team long enough, it's not looking good for them, unfortunately. I'm saying this because I want them to prove me wrong. I want them to prove me wrong. Excuse me, I keep burping. Good Lord. I want them to prove me wrong. I want them to go in. What I really want them to do is to go into Cincinnati and beat the Bengals. I want them to do that. They've done it the last 2 years. They did it with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback after the Bengals were in the Super Bowl the year before in the season opener 2 years ago. I want them to go in there and beat them. Do I think it's going to happen? No, because I think Cincinnati knows that every game is do or die. If you lose, it's pretty much over for your season. So, unfortunately, that's why I'm picking the Bengals to win this one. It'll probably be a one-sided game for Cincinnati. So, unfortunately, I gotta give the Bengals the win here. The season's pretty much on the line for them every single week at this point. So, give me the Bengals to go to 5-7, and the Steelers to drop to 8-4. Next up, we've got the Houston Texans traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jaguars. Jaguars had the bye week last week, and did absolutely nothing that they said they were going to do if they lost to Detroit as badly as they did, and they did. And supposedly nothing really happened because, let's be honest, they're going to wait until the season is over to fire Doug Peterson and get rid of Press Taylor and pretty much start from scratch again. I mean, that's what it's literally going to be like at this point going forward. And, yeah, like, how do you not do anything after losing 52-6 to Detroit? After you promised everybody that if the Lions beat you as badly as they did, you were going to make a lot of significant changes. But unfortunately, you didn't do that, and so now you're stuck for the next 6 weeks with this core that you have right now. And you're facing a Houston Texans team, which is... I had this team picked as my dream pick for the Super Bowl. What the fuck was I thinking? Because, oh my god... The Texans right now, they have completely fallen apart at the worst possible time. I mean, they were looking like one of the best teams in football at 6-2. They have lost 3 of their last 4 games. And they have 1 game before the bye week, and it's a game against Jacksonville, which on paper seems like a game they should win. But they lost to Tennessee. And that's why I'm deeply concerned about them going into this game against Jacksonville. Jacksonville has tried, though. Jacksonville has tried to win games, but they've always been unable to fall off to get back on track when they need to. I feel like this is a game that could be a massive turning point for both of these franchises because the Texans, they pretty much have to start winning games in order to keep that spot in the AFC South going, in the playoff picture going. But unfortunately, after what happened last week against Tennessee, I would not be shocked if the Jaguars somehow pulled off a win here. And as we saw last week, divisional games are a complete crapshoot at this point. So I'm going to go crazy on this one. I'm going to say the Jacksonville Jaguars will find a way to win this game somehow. The Texans just can't hold it together. C.J. Stroud is trying to play hero ball way too much, and it's going to cost them when it matters the most. So unfortunately for the Texans fans, I'm sorry. I got to go with the team that is playing with some form of life left over to them. And unfortunately, it's not the team that's 7-5 right now. It's the team that's 3-9. So I'm going to go 2-9. So I'm going to go with the Jaguars to go to 3-9 and the Texans to drop to 7-6. I mean, there's really nothing more you could say about how bad the Texans have been the last couple weeks. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I think Jacksonville finds a way to win in possibly another ugly football game for them. But that's a game I think they're going to win. So give me the Jaguars to win this one. Texans to drop to 7-6. So moving on, we've got a matchup between the Arizona Cardinals and the Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota, like I said before, won in overtime barely on a field goal against the Chicago Bears, who really gave it their all in that game. And now they go up against the Arizona Cardinals, who did absolutely nothing against Seattle last week. And was really looking like one of the dominant teams going into that game, and then all of a sudden, when they come back from the bye week, they just completely crap the bed and give Cincinnati an easy win overall. And I feel like this is the game that Arizona could easily come back from. I mean, Cardinals have played pretty good football up to that point, up until they had this game against Seattle. They were playing dominant football. And I think they have I think that Minnesota, they're very vulnerable right now. They're more vulnerable than I think a lot of people are willing to let on because of how close these wins have been. There's not been a really significant big win for them, in my opinion, at all. Like, the most significant win I think they had this year was when they beat Houston, and they beat the 49ers all the way back in weeks 2 and 3. But other than that, though, Minnesota has been very, very close on these games here. It almost feels like 2022 Minnesota Vikings and not really a Minnesota Vikings team that's radically different, or just feels like a team that doesn't have to make me stop saying that 2017 was a fluke, because that's exactly what this feels like right now. This feels like a very fluky football team, and I think Arizona can take full advantage of them with the way they've been playing before the bye week. I think Arizona finds a way to win this one. I think it's going to be a close game. I think Arizona will find a way to eke out a win in this one. So I'm going to take the Cardinals to go to 7-5. the Vikings to drop to 9-3. Moving on, we have the New England Patriots welcoming in the Indianapolis Colts. And, of course, if you remember back in the days of old, 20 years ago, Colts and the Patriots were in the same division. And, of course, there's been legendary battles between the Patriots and the Colts when Tom Brady and Peyton Manning were the quarterbacks of each team. And, needless to say, that has not been the case so far since Brady retired and Manning retired. It's been mostly either one-sided or just very, very ugly in so many ways. Of course, last year they had that infamously bad game in London when the Colts somehow eked out a win in that one. And this time around, this is the last game for the Patriots before their bye week, which is coming very late in the season. The Colts have been okay in the last couple of weeks overall. They've shown a little bit of brief flashes of promise. They can't really decide on what their future is. Do they want Joe Flacco to be the future of their team, or do they want Anthony Richardson to be the future of their team? Anthony Richardson has been showing brief flashes of promise all season long, and then last week against the Lions, they looked absolutely horrible against them, but then again, they were playing the Lions. New England has shown brief flashes of promise. They're mostly a team just waiting for next season, but the most promising thing about them is Drake May, who's played very well for them, and they've had opportunities to win games, but they just can't get past the fact that the rest of New England's not that very good. This could be another one of those very sloppy games overall. For this one in particular, I'm going with the team that's the most dominant right now, and that to me is the Indianapolis Colts, who I think are going to be able to get by the Patriots pretty quick, pretty fast. I think they're going to find a way to get a win on this one here. And they also have a bye week the following week as well. I didn't know that, but yeah. So I'm going to take the Colts to win this one to go to 6-7. Put the pressure on the Houston Texans. Colts go to 6-7. Patriots drop to 3-10. So moving on, we have the Seattle Seahawks hosting the New York Jets. The Jets. What the fuck? I mean, what is happening in the New York Jets organization? Because you got rid of Joe Douglas, you got rid of Robert Saleh, you've only won one game with your interim head coach Jeff Ulbrich. You brought in Phil Savage from the Cleveland Browns as your interim general manager. You're possibly going to not see Aaron Rodgers in the Jets uniform again next season, and you've got 6 games to basically turn the season around. And you got to start with a game against the Seattle Seahawks, who got a big win last week against Arizona, and this is not looking like a game that this is looking like the Jets are just waiting for the season to pretty much be over with, and who knows if it's going to be Aaron Rodgers presents the New York Jets starring Aaron Rodgers by the time the season ends. I mean, seeing what the New York Giants just did this past week, it would not surprise me if Aaron Rodgers gets cut for the team sooner rather than later, and they just go with whatever backup quarterback they have right now, because it's just not looking good for the Jets right now, which should make the Seattle game an easy win for them. So not really much of a surprise here. I'm going with the Seahawks to win this one to go to 7-5. Jets dropping to 3-9, and just hoping to God the season comes to an end sooner rather than later for them. Which brings us to our next game, and that is the Tennessee Titans at the Washington Commanders. Tennessee impressively getting a win in Houston. The Texans pretty much gave them opportunities to win the game, and they took every advantage of it. I mean, this was their first really convincing win as a football team. It's just like, okay, wow, like where the hell did that come from? And Will Levis didn't look terrible, surprisingly, which is amazing to think about. They're going up against the Washington Commanders, who went from being one of the highlight teams of the NFL, a team that looked like they were going to easily go in and dominate over the NFC East, and last couple weeks it has not been the case. And after a game like the one against the Cowboys, that's a game that could easily be very, very depleting for them and just suck out all the life they have left over from them. And it's just not looking good right now for the Washington Commanders. And unfortunately, kind of like with the Texans, I feel like the Tennessee Titans are going to use that momentum to go into this game and just lay a goose egg on the Commanders overall. I think they're going to make the Commanders lay a goose egg, I should say, because the Commanders right now are really struggling. Marshawn Lattimore, their big trade acquisition that they got in November at the trade deadline, has yet to play one game, I think, as far as I know. Yeah, as far as I know, I don't think he played last week either, so I don't know what's going on with that, but the Commanders have just looked very, very bad in the month of November, and unfortunately, I don't think that's really going to change going into December. I mean, they are really struggling right now. They've got a bright future ahead of them. I don't think it's over for them by any means necessary, but like they got to start churning out some wins here and getting some hope back again. I don't think they're going to win the division. I think that's Philadelphia's to lose right now. But man, it's a rough stretch going ahead, and I don't think this Tennessee game is going to help them out per se. They also have a bye week next week too. All these teams getting late bye weeks right now. But I digress. I think the Tennessee Titans continue that momentum they had against Houston. They go into Washington and somehow find a way to win this game. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Titans to win, to go 4-8, and the Commanders to drop to 7-6. Moving on to the 4 o'clock games, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hosting the Carolina. No, I take that back. I'm sorry. The Carolina Panthers hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay will host Carolina at the end of the month, but this is the first time they'll be playing the Buccaneers this season. And the Buccaneers, like I said before, got a big win over the Giants on Sunday. It wasn't even close. The Giants just completely cratered and fell apart, and Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans was back in the lineup too. I don't think he really did much that game, as far as I know, but Buccaneers dominated that game overall, and slowly but surely, they're finding that magic again that they had at the start of the season. Like with the Miami Dolphins, though, is it too little too late? Because you have the Carolina Panthers, who, after struggling for much of the season, have found a way to win pretty good games overall. I mean, they dominated over the New Orleans Saints, then they beat the Giants, and then they gave Kansas City everything in the first game after the bye week. So Carolina has nothing really to be ashamed about right now. If they can find a way to get back on track and find ways to get wins, I think they can easily go into these games overall and find ways to get some wins here. And I think they can go in here and give Tampa Bay a run for their money right now. I think Carolina is playing really good football right now. They've played pretty well in the last couple of weeks. And Bryce Young's getting better and better. This is probably the lift that Carolina needed. I mean, this is probably what they needed after the last year and a half have been so terrible for them. If they keep this up, maybe they can find a way to beat Tampa Bay. But like I said, Tampa Bay, I think it's a little bit too late for them to gain some traction overall. I think I said Atlanta lost to Carolina beforehand, but no, Atlanta beat Carolina in the first game they played against in Carolina. What was the other game that Atlanta lost? Oh, it was against the Saints. Okay, so it was not Carolina. It was the New Orleans Saints, and that was I think the first game with the new interim head coach Darren Rizzi. But back to Carolina, I just wanted to clear that up because I completely botched that up. But going back to this game here, Tampa Bay, they played a good game last week, but like I said, I think it's too little too late for them. I think they might win a couple more games, but I don't think it's going to be enough for them to get back in the playoffs overall. I think it's going to be too close for them, and I think Carolina could use this as a boost for Bryce Young's career going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and say the Carolina Panthers find a way to win this one. I'm going to say they're going to go to 4-8. Buccaneers will drop to 5-7. So moving on to, speaking of the Saints, let's go ahead and talk about them. They have a game that they'll host against the Los Angeles Rams. Saints had the bye week last week. The Rams got completely destroyed by Philadelphia on Sunday, and it wasn't even close. Like that team that had so much promise going into that game, just had it all completely torn from them as soon as Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley got going. The good news for them is that the New Orleans Saints don't have as much of a talent on the level of the Eagles, so I think there's a possibility they go in this game and win it. I mean, the New Orleans Saints right now, they've won 2 games with their interim head coach. I hope that doesn't mean they're going to go with him for the rest as the full-time head coach. But I don't think the Saints really are going to do much in terms of getting traction overall. I mean, this is a team that started off as one of the best teams in the league at the start of the season, but ever since they went 2-0, they lost 7 pretty bad games. They could have easily won. And they have not been able to gain any traction since then. They got wins against Atlanta and Carolina once they got rid of Dennis Allen. But at the same time, though, I think it's too little too late for them. I think the Rams have so much more to play for. They've got to prove that Sunday night against the Eagles was a fluke and not them. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to get back to 500. I'm going to give the Rams the win here. Give me the Rams to go to 6-6. Saints to drop to 4-8. And then we've got possibly the biggest matchup of the entire week, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles at the Baltimore Ravens. The Eagles, of course, coming off of that dominant win over the Los Angeles Rams on Sunday night. Saquon Barkley continuing to just plow through the record books and having a big game with 300 overall yards in that game. I mean, New York, what the hell were you thinking not signing him to an extension overall? And then you've got the Baltimore Ravens, who, unlike the Philadelphia Eagles, are probably the one team that is in this league that is one of the most boring teams that keeps winning games, because I keep telling people about this, like, every time the Ravens get into a game where everyone overhypes it as, oh, this is going to be the best game of the week. This is going to be an incredible game. Look at this matchup we have here against, two red hot football teams. And every single time, it's always the Baltimore Ravens that dominates them in every single game. We've had that so many times this season. I mean, we had it against the Cowboys. We had it against the Bills on Sunday night. We had it when the Denver Broncos came to town, when the Broncos were on a roll. It was like that with the Chargers game this past week. Of course, the Harbaugh ball. And the Chargers had an opportunity to go win that game and win, is to dominate over them. And then after they scored 10 points, the Ravens just completely took over. Like, the Ravens are not a fun team to watch overall. I mean, they're a team that just literally does the same thing every single week. They can be just as good as they want to be, but okay, you can win as many regular season games as you want to. Are you just gonna lay a goose egg in the playoffs like you always do? Because that's exactly what they did last year in the AFC Championship game against Kansas City. And yeah, these wins really do not mean anything. If you can't get anything going at the bye week, if you can't get anything going in the playoffs overall, and you're just relying on how good your regular season was, like, you're not going to gain any traction going forward here. Yeah, they've got the toughest 5 games coming up here. They've got this matchup against Philadelphia. Then they go to New York, which is not really that bad of a game after their bye week. Then they host Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh has pretty much dominated them in the last couple of years, no matter what. Then they got to face the Texans, who are probably going to be in desperation mode at this point. And who knows how good the Cleveland Browns will be at the end of the season if they keep that stretch up. But with this game in particular, though, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Ravens, everyone is going to say that they're going to overhype this as a big matchup overall, but we all know how this is going to turn out. If you ever watch a Ravens game, you know exactly how this turns out. Philadelphia will probably get an early lead. They'll probably do the same thing that the Chargers did. They get a 10-0 lead. Everyone's going to wonder what's going to happen, what's going on with the Ravens. I mean, they can't come back from this whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, Derrick Henry gets going, and then it's just like the wheels come off the car, and the Eagles all of a sudden have nothing left in the tank, and just give the Ravens an easy win. That's probably what's going to happen here. And I've seen this movie way too many times to know exactly how this is going to turn out. And as good as the Philadelphia Eagles have been, this is exactly the type of game that the Ravens can easily win so quickly, and it won't even be close when it's all said and done. So, not surprisingly, I'm going to take the Ravens to win this one, to go to 9-4, and the Eagles to drop to 9-3, essentially take the lead back in the AFC North. And everything in the NFL is all right in the world, because the Pittsburgh Steelers are not the top team in the AFC North anymore. And so now the focus can be on the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, and what team the Steelers will lose to badly in the wild card round. Yeah, I'm bitter. I'm sorry. Like, I've seen this song and dance before. I'm preparing for myself for another December to remember, and not a good one. So, but like I said, Ravens over the Eagles, 9-4 Ravens, 9-3 Eagles. And next up on Sunday Night Football, we've got the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo in what could be a snow game. There is reportedly going to be snow in that game, kind of similar to what we saw against the Steelers and the Browns on Thursday night. And if that's the case, this game should be pretty interesting and pretty dominant for the Buffalo Bills. 49ers didn't have Brock Purdy last week, and they looked pretty bad overall. I don't think that's going to change overall this week, and we don't know if Brock Purdy's going to be ready to go for this game. Probably going to be. I think there's more of an optimism that Purdy could be available for this game, but the Buffalo Bills have played some of the best football ever since Week 5. Ever since that game when they lost to the Houston Texans, they've just been dominant in the 6 games since then to get to 9-2, to have the bye week right after you beat Kansas City the way that you did. Buffalo's playing with house money right now, and now they're going into a game with the defending NFC champions, who are not the same football team they were before, and I think are going to struggle at the worst possible time to get back on track overall. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that the Buffalo Bills will dominate in this game here, and I think I had their record actually at 6-6, because I think I had them on this list that I have here. So that's actually not the correct record for them. It's 5-6 right now, and probably going to be 5-7 after this one. I'm going to say Buffalo gets to 10-2. And judging by that, the Buffalo Bills should have the AFC East locked up with that if the Packers beat the Dolphins, which I predict that's going to happen. So give me the Bills to go to 10-2, the 49ers to drop to 5-7, excuse me, not 6-6. Which brings us to the last game of Week 13, and that is the Monday Night Football showdown between the Cleveland Browns and the Denver Broncos. The Denver Broncos are playing with house money right now. They are on a roll. The Broncos have won many games, with Bo Nix showing a lot of promise in his first year as the quarterback for the Denver Broncos. And, the Broncos didn't start off strong early on, but once that Tampa Bay game came around in Week 3, Bo Nix really started to become his own, and becoming the really good QB overall, and one that people don't really talk about that much. The focus is always on Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, but Bo Nix has been putting together a pretty damn impressive campaign in his first year, and right now things are looking pretty good for the Broncos to potentially get to the playoffs for the first time since Peyton Manning took them to the Super Bowl that year. Now, obviously, I don't think they're going to make the Super Bowl, but their schedule overall is pretty good going forward. You got this game against Cleveland. You get a bye week. You host the Colts, who are very much a mixed bag football team. The Chargers could definitely go one of two ways. Then they go to Cincinnati, and then you end the season in Kansas City in a game that will probably be meaningless for the Chiefs, because they will probably already have locked up the number one seed, because that's what they pretty much do every year. But the Browns, of course, coming off that win against the Steelers, and the overhype is already has already begun for them. That was pretty much their Super Bowl, and they're going to keep pretending like they have a chance to make a deep playoff run. And Jameis Winston, the national treasure of the league, which that just made me cringe so badly when I saw that on the NFL YouTube channel. No joke. There was literally a video with the image of Jameis Winston being called the national treasure known as Jameis Winston. Just like, get the fuck out of here with that shit, man. I mean, seriously, like, we're really gonna pretend like beating the Steelers on a Thursday night when you literally have nothing else left in the tank, and you're sitting at 3-8. We're gonna pretend like we're gonna pretend like that. This is such a big deal for them, and it's really not when you really think about it, because the Browns are just such a poorly run football team. Like, no matter how they want to sell this, they're always going to be a terrible football team, no matter what. I don't care what anybody says. And going into this game, the Denver Broncos are playing with house money right now, and I would just love it to see the Denver Broncos just wake the Browns back into reality and just let them know that, hey, you ain't that special, and you're not a good football team, and this should definitely be a game that they should easily win. One would think, and I hope that they do that, because they have the best chance they've had in years to get to the playoffs, and, a win against the Cleveland Browns could do so much for that organization with Bo Nix and Sean Payton, and I think a lot of people would agree that probably is what should happen. And one would hope that would indeed happen. So I'm going to go ahead and say that. I'm going to go ahead and predict the Broncos to win this one, to go to 8-5, and the Browns to drop to 3-9 at this point. So those are my predictions for Week 13. Just to recap, I have the Chicago Bears beating the Lions, the Cowboys over the Giants, the Packers over the Dolphins, the Chiefs over the Raiders, the Falcons over the Chargers, the Bengals over the Steelers, the Jaguars over the Texans, the Cardinals over the Vikings, the Colts over the Patriots, the Seahawks over the Jets, the Titans over the Commanders, the Panthers over the Buccaneers, the Rams over the Saints, Ravens over the Eagles, Bills over the 49ers, and the Broncos over the Browns. And pray to God that I actually have a better record than I did last week, because, good Lord, 5-13 is just the worst. So there you go. That's my Week 13 NFL predictions. Thank you guys so much for watching this week's episode of the NFL Network. If you want to see what I had to say about Week 12, go ahead and check out the video I made before. Check out some of the other videos I've made on the show. And I will see you guys next week. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope it's a good one. I'll see you guys next week. Take care.